Good evening, everyone. Good evening. Madam Clerk, when appropriate, if you could just tell us when we could start, that'd be great.
I have 5:31. We may start whenever you wish, President Canepa.
Great, thank you so much. Let me welcome you to the San Mateo County Office of Emergency Services, a meeting of April 15th, 2021. Can we have a roll call, please?
Atherton,
Yes, here.
Belmont,
Davina Hurd, present.
thank you. Brisbane,
Karen Cunningham, present.
thank you very kindly. Burlingame,
And O'Brien Kegren, present.
thank you. Colma,
Diana Colvin, present.
thank you. Daly City, East Palo Alto,
Lisa Gaucher, present.
thank you. Foster City,
John Freeman, present.
thank you. Half Moon Bay, Hillsborough,
Deborah Penrose, present. I apologize. I was trying to unmute.
that's quite all right. Hillsborough,
Marie Drung, present.
thank you. Menlo Park,
Cecilia Taylor, present.
Millbrae,
Ann Schneider, present.
thank you. Pacifica,
Sue Vaterloff's here.
thank you. Portola Valley,
John Richards, present.
thank you. Redwood City, San Bruno,
Rico Medina, present.
thank you. San Carlos, San Mateo,
Joe Goethals, present.
thank you. South San Francisco,
Eddie Flores, present.
thank you. Town of Woodside, and just to ensure that we didn't have a muted microphone, we'll recall Daly City. Daly City. Recalling Redwood City. Redwood City. Recalling San Carlos. San Carlos. Recalling Woodside. Woodside. President Canepa, we have a quorum.
Great, thank you very much. Before we move on to the next agenda, I just want to tell you tonight we have quite a bit on our agenda this evening. As many of you know, the Office of Emergency Services has separated from the Sheriff's Office and is transitioning to the County Manager's Office. Actually, the Office of Emergency Services was under the County Manager's Office about 25 years ago. Since our County Manager, Mike Callaghy, is our incident commander of our San Mateo County operation, it makes sense that the OES would be under his department. In order to do this tonight, we basically need to create a new department with new policies and procedures in addition to a budget. We'll be reviewing the JPA agreement and budget this evening. It's important to remember that the OES will still continue to work very closely with the Sheriff's Department when needed. And I wanted to point out a couple things. The first is, while we have these presentations before us on the JPA agreement, and I see our county counsel, David Silberman here, understand that there will be no action taken on those items tonight. However, this is an opportunity for the members to present their input and feedback. And so with that, we'll move to item 2. Can I get a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
A second.
Second.
Great, thank you. Roll call, please.
Atherton,
Aye.
Belmont,
Aye.
Brisbane,
Aye.
Burlingame,
Aye.
Colma,
Aye.
Daly City was not present. East Palo Alto,
Aye.
Foster City,
Aye.
Half Moon Bay,
Aye.
Hillsborough,
Aye.
Menlo Park,
Aye.
Millbrae,
Aye.
Pacifica,
Aye.
Portola Valley,
Aye.
Redwood City was not present at roll call. San Bruno,
Yes.
San Carlos was not present at roll call. San Mateo,
Aye.
South San Francisco,
Aye.
Woodside was not present at roll call. President Canepa, motion has carried unanimously.
Great, thank you so much, Mr. Belleville. That brings us to item 3, approval of the minutes of the January 21st meeting. Is there a motion on the table?
So
Move
moved.
to second.
All right, roll call, please.
Atherton,
Abstain. I was not present for that meeting.
thank you. Belmont,
Aye.
Brisbane, Brisbane's having an audio problem. Burlingame,
Aye.
Colma,
Did you call Colma?
yes, please.
Yes. Aye.
East Palo Alto,
Aye.
Foster City,
Aye.
Half Moon Bay,
Aye.
Hillsborough,
Aye.
Menlo Park,
Aye.
Millbrae,
Abstain, not present.
Pacifica,
Aye.
Portola Valley,
Aye.
Redwood City was not present at roll call. San Bruno,
Aye.
San Mateo,
Aye.
South San Francisco,
I'll abstain. I wasn't present.
Brisbane, were you able to,
The mayor sent a in the chat that she's
Yes.
abstaining.
oh, very good, I see it now, thank you. President Canepa, the motion carries with 4 abstaining and the balance unanimous.
Great, wonderful. That brings us to item 4, the presentation of the OES 2021-2022 budget. Mr. Belleville and Mr. Leach.
Good afternoon, good evening, President Canepa. Thank you for the introduction. It's Dan Belleville here in the Office of Emergency Services, calling in from our Emergency Operations Center. I'm the guy here behind the mask. This is actually, we're approaching 14 months now since we've been in here. It's been very, very active during the entire time. Of course, we had the CZU incident along with the COVID incident, and we're still working both of them. And I'll do a very brief presentation on those later, but please forgive me for having to talk through the mask. But I want to do a quick introduction to my right. Don Matei returned to us. Some of our members may recall Don Matei worked with us in OES a number of years ago and has returned to help out while we're pretty busy taking care of both these incidents and preparing for the next year. So Don, welcome back.
Thank you.
The other thing, Mr. President, is Mr. Callaghan won't be able to join us tonight. Like you, he's very busy. Like all of us, he's very busy. And I'll be filling in for him for any questions that may come up or something that needs to be passed along. It's an honor to be with our Emergency Services Council members. For those of you that I've not been in person, it's a pleasure to see some of you again tonight and to introduce myself to you for the first time. And as Mr. Canepa had described earlier, we're going to present the budget for the fiscal year 21-22. And we're certainly open and welcome to comments, but like many firsts that we talked about, primarily as the president talked about, separating from the sheriff's office under the county manager's office, we also, as a first, weren't able to meet in person this time. So we had to meet virtually. And I want to acknowledge a couple of our Emergency Services Council members that met with us to review some of the budget and raise some questions. Our Vice President, Rico Medina, the mayor at San Bruno, Marie Schwang from Hillsburough, one of our council members, John Fruman from Foster City, and Ann O'Brien Keegren, the mayor from Burlingame. They did meet with us via the internet virtually and asked a number of different questions we were happy to address. And we built in some of the requests that they asked of into tonight's presentation. And I'll turn most of the presentation over to Michael Leach from our department, but I just wanted to highlight a couple of comments that the group shared with us that they would like more information on. The first of which was some background on the San Francisco International Airport contribution. San Francisco did start contributing as a member back in 2014. A study was conducted at that time where we determined that the call volume that was supporting the airport in terms of first responder, fire, and or medical response totaled $380,000 a year. These are 2014 dollars. And there are two revenue streams at the airport. And there was a provision in an FAA order number 1590, I won't go into all the details, that allowed for services rendered to be captured as revenue, and thus that was applied to the JPA. So SFO is still a standing member. It goes back to 2014, and we don't anticipate any changes other than there may be a reduction that Michael Leach will talk about in that revenue stream for obvious reasons. The air travel was substantially impacted by COVID, Mr. President. So we think that there'll be an adjustment in that revenue stream for the coming year. The other comments that were raised that we addressed were the cap. We have a $500,000 reserve cap. And so there was some conversation about that, where it started and what actually the cap is. So again, Mr. Leach will talk a little bit about that. There was a $23,000 decrease in the on-call pay. And that was primarily because we separated from the sheriff's office, where their Emergency Services Bureau, the ESB, has officers on duty. And now we will have fewer people on call. So therefore, there'll be a reduction in the on-call pay. There was a suggestion that we have a mid-year budget review. So we thought that that was a good idea. And so sometime in the middle of the fiscal year, we report back to address any questions that may come up from the council. So we're happy to do that. And then also a suggestion that we put some footnotes in the future for any significant changes, whether they go up or down, so that we can describe what the reasons are behind the changes. For example, what I just gave with the on-call pay. So that was the idea behind that, is to put the footnotes in there. So it's a little easier to spot and identify that reason. Overall, the budget comes in 0.5% lower than the previous year if we use the revenues, or excuse me, if we use the reserves. And Michael will talk a little about that. Most of that reduction was in the form of renegotiating the JPA agreement with the fire battalion chief that also serves in the Office of Emergency Services. It comes from San Mateo Consolidated Fire. When I was appointed to this position in September, I got on the phone with the fire chief and we negotiated a lower cost because it is an expensive position and we don't own that position 100%. So we felt it was fair to reduce that amount to what we felt was appropriate for the time that's spent in OES, because that battalion chief also doubles as the fire service battalion chief outside of OES. So the reduction was primarily from that. And I think with all of that said, I have Michael Leach on the line. And Michael, if I can pass it to you, you can present the budget and we'll be happy to address questions from the council.
Okay. President Canepa and members of the ESC JPA, I'll present my screen here. or share with you the PowerPoint. Again, this is for the fiscal year 21-22 proposed budget. As Mr. Belleville mentioned, this is simply to present tonight and to make a recommendation to approve, but not to actually do the vote. The move my thing here. This is a breakdown of last year's budget, or the current year we're in, which is fiscal year 2021, and comparison to fiscal year 21-22. As you'll note in the top line, Office of Emergency Services will be slightly under, and the Environmental Health Division for Hazmat is a little bit larger, maybe about by 40K or so. The state mandated planning services remains flat at about 52K. And you'll see on the very bottom line, our total budget, as Dan mentioned, is in about 0.5% lower than it is in the current year. The proposed budget this year is 3.18 million and change. It's important to notice that service levels remain unchanged. We're not reducing services. As Mr. Belleville mentioned, we do have minor year-over-year changes for some of the cities. And as you go through the memo, you'll note that in that PDF, there's about 10 pages that acts as an appendix to the 2-page memo. And each of those goes through different parts of the budget. The first 2 pages, 1 and 2, are what we would call the summary, comparing what you would have, what you'd be paying if you didn't use the reserves versus what you'd be paying if you did use the reserves. The way that the budget is put together, for those of you who are new, the cost for the city, or for the overall budget, is split essentially 50-50 between the county and the cities. The cities' costs are created using the assessor clerk recorder's population, or excuse me, their total roll value for assessed property values. And we use the Department of Finance, California Department of Finance population numbers for city populations. Those 2 factors together are used in determining each city's cost share. As you know, property values and population fluctuate year over year, so these values will change slightly year to year, either up or down. Overall, compared with the current fiscal year 2021 budget, there's an overall decrease of $16,187. As Mr. Belleville mentioned, this decrease is primarily due to the lowered contract expenses for the fire battalion chief. We have existing costs for the EOC, rock, and hazmat are flat. So this is talking about, the rock is talking about some rent and stuff like that. And also we do have the removal of the on-call charges that the sheriff used to charge. We have 2 scenarios for you this evening. And as Mr. Belleville mentioned, this JPA authorized previously the use of reserves to bring down the overall cost for both the city and the county. And last year authorized the use of, if voted upon, 200,000 in reserves. The top line you'll see here is the first column is if we did not use the reserves. For the city agencies as a whole, this would equate to 1.47 million and change. For the county, it would be 1.42 million and change. If we did utilize the reserves, each side basically drops by 100K. So both the city agencies and county. As I mentioned earlier, as an appendix to the memo, we include each year all of the budget tables for folks to review. And I've highlighted a couple of numbers here. In this case, what we're looking at is the budget that you would see if you were using the 200K in reserves. The top arrow is pointing to what the cities would pay. The next arrow to what the county would pay, and then the overall. And that is compared to this column that I'm talking about, which is fiscal year 21-22 total program cost. That's compared next to the adopted budget from our current fiscal year 2021. And you can see the amount of change that occurs both on the county side and the city side. The recommendation we have for you tonight is to, in the June meeting, to adopt the fiscal year 21-22 Emergency Services JPA proposed budget, including utilizing the 200K in reserves. As Mr. Belleville mentioned, the Finance Advisory Group reviewed the budget and concurs with this recommendation. At this point, that is all I have for you this evening. I'm happy to take any questions you may have.
Great. Thank you very much. I want to recognize Councilmember Sylvester from Daly City. He's been on for quite a while, so let the notes denote that. With that, we do have one hand up right now, and that's Ann Snyder. Ms. Snyder.
Thank you. Thank you, Board President. Question, I'm trying to remember what services San Francisco is paying for SFO. And then my follow-up would be, well, if SFO is paying for something, does SFPUC, meaning the watershed area, get similar services? Or is it really we're going down there and sending paramedics to San Francisco Airport? Help me with that.
Michael, do you want me to address that, or are you?
Whichever you're comfortable with.
And before you go, just to let you know, Millbrae's main landowner is SFPUC, followed by SFO, some of which is endangered species land. And we had a fire on the SFO land, but we have plenty of canyons owned by SFPUC. So I'm just trying to understand how it all works in the event of a fire or an earthquake.
In terms of response?
How it fits within what emergency services covers.
The cost of the airport.
So I'm not sure I'm clear on the question, but we do provide it, as you know, paramedic services countywide is contracted, and there are quite a number of calls over to the airport in addition to fire mutual aid, whether it's a fire in a machine shop on the SFO property or in the fringe, the wildland. So we share resources back and forth, and we treat SFO as if it's a county response area, because it is in our county response area, even though the city and county of San Francisco owns it, as you well know. So that's where those fees were generated from, and going back to 2014. And so the contribution was logical for SFO to be a part of the JPA because of that response. And I suppose there were a number of things, we actually talked about this. There are a number of ways that we could have included them, but the response was the logical one. So it's not the only one. As you know, and I'll talk about a little later on this evening, we've partnered with SFO and in particular the parking garage for the mass vaccination. So, it's not only response, it's these other things, but it was something that was developed. And then going forward, Don, I don't know if you wanted to add on to it, but, and I don't know if I
let me say, I'm perfectly happy with what you all have done or what we are all doing with SFO. I'm just curious, do we expend any of our resources on SFPUC land? And are we reimbursed for that?
Yeah, we'd have to look into that. I'm certain that we do. We would provide resources, but I don't know about, I don't know any additional details. So I'll have to flesh that one out for you.
I would appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Snyder. We do have a question in the chat from Ms. Cunningham. Curious to why OES services is lower, services dollars are lower. Someone want to take a shot at that? Or I don't know if Karen is still here.
There is, yeah, there are some offsets on the county side, just as part of the normal budget outside of that occur after the split. I can provide a more lengthy response. It goes into the weeds quite a bit, President Canepa. But through Mr. Belleville, I can provide a written response for that.
Okay, if you wouldn't mind doing that and getting back to Ms. Cunningham, if there are other board members who want that. Are there any additional questions on the budget? Mr. Fruman.
Yeah, I guess I was confused. I saw the question that came up regarding the OES lower cost, and I thought that was referencing what Dan mentioned earlier regarding the savings on the overtime, on the call out fees and costs, and the renegotiated battalion chief costs. I don't know if that really answers the council member's question or not.
Staff want to take a stab at this?
Michael?
Yeah, again, I'll provide a written response to address that, and it'll be a little bit more efficient than doing a verbal discussion, I believe,
Okay.
if that's okay with the board.
Okay. Mr. Medina.
Thank you, President Canepa. Very quickly, I just, not really a question. I did want to thank John Marie and Ann from Burlingame who met, and really I will tell you that the team did a lot of, they listened to us. They really did a lot of work in their presentation. And I also want to thank staff for renegotiating the battalion chief. I think that's the fair and accurate thing in which is the right thing. And I appreciate looking out for those details and doing that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. One thing I did mention to you in our January meeting is I've spent my whole career trying to consolidate and reduce costs and be as efficient as possible. And I can assure you we're doing the same thing with everything that we're doing going forward. Thank you.
Ms. Hurt.
Thank you. So reducing costs of the member agencies with the application of the 200,000 of reserve sounds great.
Mhm.
But I'm wondering how much is left in reserve? If someone could tell me that. And then second, was there any thought or discussion around not saying that there will be another pandemic, we're hoping to be post-pandemic here pretty soon, but saving that money for whatever other emergency might come our way?
This is Michael Leach. I can address that. Currently in reserves, just to give you a round number, it's about 778K. And this year we're anticipating, of course, some money coming in from SFO, so that we'll find out at year-end close for the San Mateo County fiscal side what that actual number will be, but I would anticipate it being northwards of 800K. Now, to that end, at year-end, we'll also be expending the 200K if this board approves the use of those reserves. That will, in essence, bring us down to in the 600K range.
I can also mention that we have looked at some items that might be beneficial to us going forward, exactly as was mentioned, in preparation for other incidents. And so we have prepared that list. Should we need to do those expenditures, we'd run that before the board. But we're happy that there are reserves, and we are planning for things that if in the event we need them, then those healthy reserves hopefully would help us get to the point where we'd be able to accommodate those purchases or whatever those needs are.
Perfect. I was thinking of wildfires in particular. So thank you.
Are there any additional questions? I just wanted to know, Mr. Belvo, maybe Michael can answer this. Do we have I know the reserves are healthy. Do we have a formalized reserve policy? And what is that? I know, in some cities and in some counties, there's a benchmark. Do we have such a formalized policy for the Office of Emergency Services, Mr. Belville?
Sir, I do not know that. I do know that we have the cap, but I don't know if it's formalized. I'd either have to defer to Michael or we'd have to get back to you on that particular question.
Yeah, if you can, if you don't mind, I think it's just, some days when it comes to the budget, as we all know, are better than other days. And I think having a formalized policy is a best practice worthy of consideration. So if you'd consider that, I would definitely appreciate it.
Yes, sir.
Are there any other questions on this item? Marie Chuang and then Ann O'Brien. Keegren.
Thank you, Chair. So regarding the reserve, I think that in the year past, this body has agreed to cap it at 500,000 and to spend down on whatever that is beyond the 500,000. At the committee, when Ann, John, Rico, and I met with Dan, one of the discussion is that for the new board members coming up on board, this is a good time to have the discussion regarding the reserve, whether it's being utilized on the personnel and the operations and to what extent. And so we should maintain a healthy, I think that the intent, and I believe that this body would agree, is to maintain a healthy reserve, but not in the burden of the member agencies.
Ms. Keegren.
Actually, my question was basically, and comment was similar to Marie's. So it may be something that we want to discuss futuristically to piggyback on Supervisor Canepa, is just to make sure we have very set criteria that we can look at futuristically due to the fact that, many cities, including the county, have lost revenue this past year and may take a year, 2, 3 years to recover. We may want to relook at our reserves and might want to set a higher standard for that in case there are needs that do come up. For example, future emergencies as wildfires, as Davina mentioned, that we have money available.
And through the chair, may I add one more comment? And that is, I know that Dan has previously at our meeting mentioned that exactly because of the emergency that arise in the last couple of years, the SMC alert volume, the call volume has increased tremendously. And I think that due to the previous contract, there is sort of a limited to the calls that I understand. So that need to be addressed also as to what is the adequate amount of volumes for our contract. So I think that is something that Dan probably will be bringing back to us in the future meetings for discussion.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for bringing that up, Marie. We have tapped that resource, the alerting system, more than ever before, and there's some pretty significant fees attached to that. So we are exploring other models and a new agreement, but those kinds of things do come up during the year. I had described in January the frequency and complexity of the incidents that we're getting. In January, I think mid-January, we had something like 8 incidents during one given day. That's when we had the high wind events, with 5 additional wildland fires between 5 and 40 acres, the civil unrest. We had a couple of PSPS events where power was shut down, including a senior center, a long-term care facility. We had 5 of our radio towers go out. So this is not uncommon. This happened in January, just a few weeks back. So we're having to tap additional resources and do things we've never seen before. It just doesn't seem to let up. So, and I don't anticipate it letting up because we're already preparing for fire season. Our moisture levels are right around July right now at this time of the year. So we anticipate more fire activity in the coming year, unfortunately.
And then Dan, just a couple questions. I thought of one. When's the last time we've raised the fees for the members? I think did we do it last year, or when's the last time that member agencies have seen an increase from the county?
Michael, did we do some research on that?
Yeah, President Canepa, I could answer that. The rates are basically set year over year, and generally we do see an increase year over year, and that's specifically due to increase of salary and benefit costs amongst the OES staff.
Got it.
And President Canova, if I could make a clarification of my earlier comments, I misspoke on the amount of reserves. And if, with your permission, I'd like to correct that.
Okay.
In the memo, folks will see that as of March 15th, 2021, the balance of that reserve fund is actually quite a bit higher, $988,403. As I noted, 200,000 would be used this year, which was approved by the board last year. That would bring it down to $788,403 at the beginning of fiscal year 21-22. So my apologies for misspeaking.
Got it. All right. And just Michael, in terms of tranches coming from the federal government, in terms of dollars, is the Office of Emergency Services going to be recipient of any of those dollars? Do we know, Mr. Belleville?
The recipient of, I'm sorry, Mr. President.
Dollars from the federal government.
Well,
so like akin to CARES, akin to what the Biden administration is proposing in June. Are we going to receive any of those additional dollars?
Well, we're not sure what the final outcome is on some of that, because it does seem to change fairly frequently, but we do have a pretty robust grant program that we've been tapping for quite a number of years. So anytime those opportunities come up, including one that surfaced about a week ago, in fact, I believe some emails were passed between you and myself and Mr. Callaghy, and we already did apply for some grants. So whether they're attached to some of the existing ones that are active right now or new ones coming forward, we're on top of those. And we never really know what the outcome will be until we get closer to either the termination date or once you're awarded. So I guess the bottom line is there's a lot of moving parts with grants. We may be able to tap some of those funds, but we don't know the final outcome now. It's going to be sort of in flux throughout the next 6 to 12 months.
Great. Thank you. Please keep us updated. Okay, so that brings us to item 5, the presentation of the OES JPA agreement, and I'm sure there's going to be a lot of questions and comments on this. Mr. Belleville.
Thank you, Mr. President. And before we finish, before we start this new item, I just wanted to thank Michael Leach. Over the course of the last 3 or 4 months, 5 months, trying to create a new department seems maybe relatively easy because it belongs under one organization, the County of San Mateo, but trying to split vehicles and widgets and responsibilities and the personnel, it has been a challenge. Michael has been with me every step of the way. We scrutinized every dollar. We met very frequently, and I can't thank him enough for assembling this budget. And we're happy to include the suggestions that come forward, because this is the new organization. And again, thank you to Michael for all his work.
Mr. Belleville, President Canepa, before we move on, I apologize. I haven't attended very many of these meetings, and I'm not confident I know how the council handles public comment. I did note that there is a public comment item at the end of the agenda, which is presumably for items not on the agenda. I also, I don't know everyone on this call, but it does not appear that there are any members of the public that are present. But I would just suggest that we determine whether there are any members of the public present who might want to comment on an item that is on the agenda, and then we can get that out of the way.
Thank you, County Council Silverman. We will acknowledge, we will make sure. I don't know, there was no public comment, I believe, on the budget. Is that correct, Mr. Silverman?
Yeah, if I may, President Canepa, if I could just ask everyone on the Zoom, is there anyone on the Zoom who intends to make public comment on any item that is on the agenda or is not on the agenda? Hearing none, I think we're probably set. Obviously, if anyone at some point joins the call, we'll notice, and we can certainly call for public comment. And if anyone is on this call who wishes to make public comment, they can always raise their hand and let us know. But otherwise, we'll assume that no one wants to make public comment.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Silverman. That brings us to item 5, the presentation of the OES JPA agreement. Mr. Belleville.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the council. Tonight, we'd also like to present the revised JPA. We discussed this at our last meeting in January, that there are some essential components that are inside the JPA that needed to be changed. I did call them out a week ago when I sent out the packet for you to review. And a little bit disappointed that we couldn't meet in person, much like we talked about with the budget, but that's the way things are these days. So our presentation is to identify the changes that we made and have folks weigh in with comments tonight and perhaps make some changes before we adopt it at our next meeting. One little interesting note that I thought I would share, if you don't mind, is I'm a bit of a history buff. And Jeff, one of the folks in our office, presented me with a pretty significant document. The agreement that we're talking about tonight with the county and all of you goes back to a document that we found that was signed on June 26, 1963. And attached to that were not 20 cities and towns, but 18 at the time. In December of 1950, that we were all partners with the MMAA agreement. So that's the Master Mutual Aid Agreement, really what we're doing today. So that goes back 71 years that we've all been together. It's pretty remarkable. When you look at this document, it's remarkable to see that it goes back, it's getting close to 100 years, 71 years already. So it was fun to see that. And I felt like the discussion we'll have tonight will be certainly welcome. And I have every bit of confidence that we're going to go 71 plus years after we get through this evening's presentation. So anyway, I thought that was fun to make note of. In the JPA agreement, for obvious reasons, we had to make some adjustments, again, because we're moving from one department to another. And a couple of them that were very simple. The first of which was moving from the sheriff's office to the CMO's office. And then the second is Mr. Callaghy would, in the simplest terms, we're rebranding. We'd like to move from the Office of Emergency Services to the Department of Emergency Management. And then there were a number of little sections, what I would call minor sentence improvements, a few words here and there, so very, very minor. And the two biggest pieces were the removal of Article number 2, which was common terminology. And the reason why we are removing that section is because we subscribe to NIMS, which is back in Maryland. NIMS, it's the Integration Center. And as a reminder to the folks, NIMS is our National Incident Management System. And because we subscribe to NIMS, if there are any changes made on a national level to common terminology, then this document would be out of date if something changed once we approve this document. So if we remove that document, or excuse me, if we remove that article and subscribe to NIMS, we will constantly remain current with the standard that's produced from the federal government. So that was the purpose of removing that section. The other section that we removed, which was pretty substantial, is attachment A. And the reason why we moved that is the very purpose of putting that in there was essentially to hold the county or OES responsible for our duties. But what we did during the time that Don Matei was here was create the EMA, the Emergency Managers Association. And each of the cities have a representative that we meet with each month. We have a good relationship with the EMA, and we have an annual report that's developed so that we understand what's being done, where our shortcomings are, and how we might address things in a coming year or in future years. So to have that in there seemed no longer necessary. It doesn't normally fit inside a JPA anyway. But we felt it was important to take that out because we do and have established the EMA and have had this working agreement to meet monthly for quite a number of years now. So we do have Mr. Silverman on board and I am here to address any questions. And Mr. President, if it's okay with you, I'd like to open it up for questions or comments.
Great. Are there any member questions at this time regarding the JPA agreement? I see Ms. Schneider's hand up. Ms. Schneider.
Hi, thank you. I have two areas of questions. The first one is article, it's page 7, Article 4, page 7. And I guess I'd never really paid attention to this section until I started reading it. And it lists all of the groups that can be invited in with the council's permission. And if, I don't know if you can pull that up, but I just was curious. For example, it talks about we can invite in the Department of Education, which is great, but it doesn't include the community college district. So I wasn't sure if we should also have a line in there that talks about the community college district. It talks about PG&E, but it doesn't talk about Peninsula Clean Energy, and that maybe there needs to be a Peninsula Clean Energy. I know that there are some parts of the county that have sanitary and water districts, but not all of us are underneath a sanitary or water district. So I was trying to figure out, why would we want, I understand we're all in it together in an emergency, depending on what it is. But if, for example, the coastal, I think they have both a water district and a sanitary district, why would they get called in as opposed to, say, a water pollution control plant in Millbrae or Burlingame or elsewise? I just wasn't quite sure of that. And the last one, some of these are brand new agencies, and I will not get the name of this JPA correct, but what about the sea level rise and flood control JPA? Should that also be, you know, if we want to invite them, we can invite them? And then finally, again, because I'm in a city that is so controlled by the city and county of San Francisco, what about SFPUC and SFO at the discretion of the chair? So those are all those ones when I looked at that section on page 7.
Great, thank you.
And then I have one other area. I am generally not a wordsmith for these, but this is on Article 9, page 12, section 9.01. And it made me start looking at how we are updating our language to get rid of sexual reference. And it went from sheriff outlined to county manager, he, she. And it's the only place in the document that I actually paid any attention to it. But I don't know if we want to, at this point, consider, when I looked up how to do it, they say you try to change your sentence structure to remove gender references. I leave it in the hands of the attorneys for that. And it may be elsewhere in the document. And I don't know if we want to, but this seems to be the time to go gender neutral. Thank you.
Are there any other questions? Mr. Belville, with these comments, what does staff plan to do with the input and the direction that we provide you tonight? Can you speak to that?
Well, I believe we would certainly have a conversation with Mr. Silberman, and we welcome the comments. And I don't know if he wants to address some of those things now, but the plan would be to make sure that we get agreement with all the partners. And going forward, to the extent that we can, we would include all of those things so that we can get approval of this document at our next quarterly meeting.
Great. Thank you. Mr. Fruman.
Thank you for the opportunity. On section 3.01 that was just discussed with the invitation of other agencies and entities, what exactly is the purpose of that section? Why are we calling out these organizations to invite them in? Presumably, if we had an emergency or disaster of some sort, we would need these agencies to participate. And maybe that's why it's there. I'm not sure. If there could be some clarification.
So, let me take that as well as the comments of Councilwoman Schneider. As far as removing gender, that's not a problem if that's the will of the council, and that's easy to do. And I just assume we'll do that. As far as 3.01, and I'll just note that like the goal in this revision was to change as little as possible. And obviously 3.01 wasn't changed. And in fact, I think that's the same language that was there from before 2014 as well. I can't say with certainty, but I'm relatively confident. And I hate to ever say that language doesn't matter, because it always matters somewhat. That language just, it doesn't really have any legal significance. It's not required in a JPA agreement. I think it was designed, although I wasn't there when it was put in, just to encourage those agencies to participate. But as I'm sure you noticed and everyone noticed, they're being invited as non-voting, non-member. I mean, basically, it's just inviting them to come to the meetings and participate in the meetings. You could do that even if that language wasn't in there. Again, I can't speak to the history as to why those particular entities were identified, but that particular provision does not have any meaningful legal significance.
So I guess the comment I would make is that maybe in the spirit of removing things that aren't useful, is maybe removing the subsections, the A through L, and making the participating partners some very generic paragraph that recognizes the fact that, like we stated, we're all in this together. They're at different times. It's appropriate to bring in other entities or organizations within our communities to assist and participate in emergency management within the county. Something similar to that would be one option. The second thing that I would make mention of, in light of what the other council members' comment was, is that sometimes it's better to just leave things generic. As an example, G right now says a representative of the San Mateo County Transit District or district. What happens if there is some movement in the region and the San Mateo County Transit District merges and they have a metropolitan district throughout 3 counties? Then we're out of date already, as opposed to putting things like water districts, sanitation districts, transportation districts, and just being a little more vague and broad with the descriptions would be another opportunity, so that it doesn't go out of date, like Dan was mentioning with the terminology.
So if it's the will of the council and we can just determine that from a consensus, we could absolutely genericize this. I will highlight the very, very end of that section where it indicates, should other interested parties be identified for participation, the organization shall consider a written request for participation and may be invited by the chair with approval of the council. So, basically, as it's written now, anyone you want to join, just like these listed organizations, could join as non-voting members with the agreement. Again, it's flexible as it is, but it also could easily be genericized. And as I mentioned, I don't know why these particular entities were identified before or when they were identified. So what I guess I would ask is, is there a consensus that that we remove the identified entities? And I guess I just ask if anyone objects to that, just let me know, and otherwise we can just genericize it.
Just a question: when you say make it general, is you're talking leaving A through L basically and making them more generic, or removing A through L and making the paragraph more generic?
The latter. Yeah. What I'm hearing is, there's 2 options. One would be more inclusive and listing more, and the other option would be removing all of the identified and simply note that any organization that wishes to be a non-voting member can join if a written request is provided and the chair approves. That's where I thought you might be leaning, Council Member Fruman, and I'm fine with that.
That's what I would support. It's pretty simple, and it takes, we could even miss someone in making the list of options more generic. We could still miss people or groups.
Absolutely. So, Supervisor.
Sorry, thank you, David. Is there any opposition Mr. Fruman's suggestion, or someone who wants to, may not be in agreement?
Through the chair, this is
Yes.
Ann Schneider.
Yes, Ann.
Ann Keegren or Ann O'Brien's ahead of me. I don't want to step on Ann.
Do you want to speak to this item, Ms. Schneider?
I do, I understand the simplicity of it completely. I think there are a couple of us who are also on SFO Noise Roundtable, and you will not imagine the amount of time we lose at meetings with Palo Alto fighting to get a place at the table. I hear what you're saying. I'm also, like many of us, also on the board of Peninsula Clean Energy, which has become an active partner in emergency preparedness in providing the battery packs for people with health issues at home in public safety power shutoff areas. So I'm okay simplifying it. I would hate to have PCE have to write a letter so that we can talk about accepting money from them so that we can get more of these solar battery packs out to help our residents who have medical devices at home. If it all works seamlessly, I'm fine.
Okay.
But we do have new partners now in emergency management. We have the new flood control zone that's going to be doing the sea level work. And it always seems like this group, emergency services, we sit out here and the relationships aren't as clear. But that could be because I'm a geographer and I like all the lines crossed. So, but I'll go with the flow.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mayor. I'm seeing no one in opposition of this. Feel free to chime in. If not, then I think we can amend that, Mr. Silverman, if that is okay, and take Mr. Fruman's suggestion. Does that sound good?
From my perspective, that's absolutely fine.
Okay, great. Mr. Fruman, do you have any other additional comments?
No, thank you.
We'll go to Ms. O'Brien.
I have two quick questions. So under section 3.03, it states that the county manager's office picks the auditor. But in addition, in that section, it says that the council selects a separate auditor. The full cost of the audit will be the responsibility of the organization. I just wanted to know, has that ever happened? Is that a shaking of a no?
I'm sorry. I don't know. I'm not aware of that ever happening. I don't know whether Don is aware of that happening during his time, but I'm not aware of that. My understanding is that historically, the sheriff's office, and this is how the language changed. Prior to this, the sheriff's office auditor did the audit. I think it was MTG, and they did the audit for years, and that was the only audit. And at least for the last 10 years, if there was another auditor, I think I would have known because I have to write a letter to the auditor regarding lawsuits and claims, of which there's never been any. But I don't think so.
Okay, I was just curious because I was wondering why it was in there.
On mute, and we go back 22 years and we're not aware of it. So we'd agree with Mr. Silverman.
Very good, thank you. And then the last question I have is under section 7.04, states under the bylaws that the council from time to time adopt and or amend bylaws for the conduction of its affairs. I know in the previous copy, I think it was every 5 years. Do we want to put a minimum amount of years it should be reviewed instead of leaving it wide open?
So I actually suggested that 5-year language be removed. That was at my recommendation. That there's no requirement to review a JPA agreement. And I'm aware of about 8 or 9, and I've never seen a provision like that before. I don't know why it was in there. I think everybody may know this, so I apologize. But I mean, this is really a formation document. Generally speaking, there isn't a reason to change a JPA agreement. So requiring a review during any particular period, there would be no reason for that. The council can revise it whenever it needs to or wants to, but unless something comes up, there's probably no real reason to review. And then on that note, I think one of the reasons that we are presenting this to you in a two-step process is that after the council presumably approves the amended JPA agreement, you then have to take it back to each of your individual cities for approval. And that's why JPA agreements are very rarely amended, because it's such a hassle really to amend them. So you kind of have to have a pretty good reason to do it.
Okay, very good. I appreciate that explanation. So as long as it's in there that it can be brought up, if there is a particular reason, then we can do so.
Absolutely.
Great, thank you.
Okay, Mayor Medina.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to thank John for bringing that up because that was one of my items. And I believe, just like Mr. Silverman said, is that once we make any modification or add or change PC to this or that, then we have to go back to the 20 jurisdictions and go through this whole process, which can be arduous. And we could by accident leave somebody out, as we've said. And then I appreciate Anne from Burlingame bringing up about the years of review, because I thought that as well. Her and I, with a few others, sat on this last time we reviewed it, and we didn't make modifications. And then my two things, the old document 4.07 section B, it just had the words plan and operational, and now it says plans. The word operations was eliminated. Just curious as to maybe why. It's not anything critical, just curiosity. And then I just want to go into, when it comes to radio communications and us having a system in place, it goes back to, if I'm understanding correctly, like FireNet 6 was established some time ago in more the south end of the county. And I don't know if is a JPA something that brings those together to ensure its continuity and its collaboration, or is that something on a separate matter that we would be doing?
So as far as the change to section, and in my copy, I apologize, I'm working off a red line. It's mine is 4.08 Director of Emergency Services Management. The numbering might be different in what you're looking at, but subsection B of that heading does remove the word operations, and that was at the request of staff. And it didn't have any legal significance. I don't know whether staff wants to comment, but that was just at the request of staff. Dan, you may be muted if you're talking.
Jeff, go ahead.
Oh, the removal of operations was to direct that the Office of Emergency Services, soon to be Department of Emergency Management, is a supporting function and not a direct service provider.
Okay, thank you, Jeff. And then just the follow-up on the communications, which maybe is not a JPA matter, it's something outside.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Could you, and I apologize, could you restate the question?
The question was just mostly on the radio communications. Back in the long ago, like a FireNet 6 established kind of a JPA on the southern end of the county. I think Dan's familiar with some of this. And so I just don't know if this is where this also ensures that we have the collaboration in our radio communications, or is this something separate than would be utilized for the JPA?
So David, I talked to Mayor Medina about this, and there are a number of different agreements within the county, different fire service agencies, and the one he's referring to is called FireNet 6, and it started in the south end of the county where a number of different fire agencies collaborated to create a communication system that was more efficient by joining forces and reducing their costs by sharing that sort of thing. So I think the mayor's question is, does this impact that kind of an agreement or other agreements by what we're approving here tonight? Or not approving,
no.
Evaluating, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I mean, I should note I'm not terribly familiar with that relationship, but I can't imagine how it would. I mean, this to oversimplify, I mean, this JPA is primarily a planning and a funding mechanism for emergency management in the county. And so, I can't see that separate entity being a part of this JPA, and certainly unless the funding for that separate entity was somehow impacted by this JPA, I don't really see any direct interplay. So I think we're fine.
And I would agree with you, because many of these agreements have been in place for years. There's never been any kind of complication or anything that would cause a problem that perhaps the mayor is concerned about. So from my perspective, yeah, the answer is no. We should be fine going forward as is.
Thank you.
Are there any additional comments? See none in the chat. See no hands raised. Is there anything staff would like to do to sort of wrap up here, Dan, in terms of when this will come back to us?
Well, Mr. President, maybe I should lean on David one more time, but certainly we'll incorporate the suggestions that were made tonight. So we'll make sure that happens. I guess my concern is if something were to come up at the last minute before our next quarterly meeting where we want to get approval, would we want to have a workshop or something, or how will we get it to the council, beforehand, so that we don't have to go through, a delayed process to get this approved?
I mean, I don't want to ever understate the importance of our work, the attorney's work, but I don't really see these JPA agreements as being terribly controversial. While I am absolutely open to presenting if a workshop was desired, I think that what my direction is I'm going to remove any references to gender in the JPA agreement. I'm going to revise section 3.01 to simplify it and remove the references to the individual entities. I can do that this week. We could then send out a red line of the document to the entire council within a week. And then if any individual member has any concerns about it, we can address those. I wouldn't expect those. If there were such an issue, I mean, we could at that point put together an informal working group at that point. But I don't foresee that being super likely.
I think the plan that you've laid out, David, I think is great. I mean, I think members had the opportunity to weigh in, give their opinions. I do see that there's minor edits and modifications. So I think us moving forward with what you talked about and reaching out to the individual members, if they had comments, that's great. And then getting it back before the board to vote on. I think that's the best path moving forward.
Happy to do it.
Thank you. Seeing no other questions, we have an informational update on COVID and CZU fire. I think it should be a pretty brief update, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Belville.
Yes, sir. Thank you. It'll be very, very brief as promised at the last meeting. Jeff, can you go to the next slide, please? So with regard to the vaccinations, I'm not going to talk about the statistics that we have. Certainly everyone is well informed as to where we're at thus far in our county. We have a pretty robust website, so I'm not going to give a bunch of facts and figures. In the bigger picture, and what we do here every day is adjust to and account for the vaccinations, how they're managed. We're continuing with our testing process, so it is very, very active, and it almost seems to change daily. The transition that we've seen in the last 7 or 10 days is we're certainly not getting the vaccination doses that we were promised or anticipated. That is a bigger issue than myself. So we have transitioned to our clinics, our local clinics. So we have a number of different clinics that are spread throughout the county. And many of the jurisdictions are either running the clinics or using some support from the county. The county is providing some deeper support in some areas versus others. But that is our focus right now, to take care of these clinics, primarily to serve those that are underserved. So we've, for the most part, shut down our mass vaccination at the event center and SFO, which were both very, very effective. The good news is I was on the phone earlier today, and it looks like we're going to see a significant improvement in the number of doses that'll be coming our way the week after next, somewhere in the range of about 15,000 a week. So that would mean that we open back up the event center where we could easily dispense with 10 to 15,000 vaccinations at the event center. And we probably would either shut down SFO at that time, or we know that the event center is going to open up with the fair this summer, so we might transition over to SFO. So at this point today, it looks like we will resume some operations with the mass vaccinations and probably continue with our local clinics on the weekends, but that's what we are doing every day. And I'm happy to take any questions if the council has any.
Ms. Schneider has her hand up. Mayor Schneider.
Apologies. I have an appointment at the event center on the 27th. I have not received a cancellation. So, I mean, there's me, okay, but there's all the other people that had their appointments. Have they been notified?
Mayor, we do have one day that's scheduled, but we're actually revising the schedule almost daily. It's highly dependent on, again, the doses and any glitches in the system, because on some weeks we don't get what's promised and we have to make up from the previous week. So there's a lot of adjusting that takes place, but I'll personally reach out to you to make sure that you and others are not left without a location to go to or something changes. So
Please, and again, here's the awkwardness. I've gotten my first vaccine. I can stay at home for 2 more months. I am speaking for my public that also have appointments, and how do I respond to them when they start getting their cancellation? So please don't look at it, it's Ann Schneider trying to take care of Ann Schneider. I think for all of us, it's how do we take care of our people and make sure that we're giving the right one message. And when you get a chance, please send that out to all of us so that we can equally stay on point, stay on message, whatever that message may be. I completely understand what the county is going through right now. And I thank you for it.
Certainly, and I absolutely understand your question, and I know that you're representing the others in addition. So clearly understood. Thank you.
And good luck.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Schneider. Mr. Fruman.
Yeah, on that same topic, just wondering, is there any issue with a delay in the second dose? I've heard that it's supposed to be 3 weeks between doses. If there's a delay because of a shortage in vaccine doses that come your way, is there any concern on the part of the public who've gotten the first shot?
The health department manages the doses so that doesn't happen. And so they are constantly looking at what's coming in, what has been administered, what's projected, so that doesn't happen. And, in some cases, we've had to trade doses that don't come in or are late. It's a bit of a shuffle game, but we've not had any significant delays thus far where people aren't able to get it for a number of additional weeks because that's being addressed. So it hasn't happened yet. We anticipate it. The health department is very focused on it, and they are paying close attention to it.
Thank you, Dan.
Mr. Fruman, and kind of address that this week, the vaccine supply, and Dan knows this, it's diminished so much. So speak to North County, we were able to do walk-ups on Thursday, Fridays for first doses. We're not doing any walk-ups this week. We're only focused on second doses, and that's without a max vaccine site. So just to be candid with you, this is a huge problem. We're going to work our way through it, but the amount of doses that the county has received is, for the last several weeks, we're really diminished this week. And so hopefully, we'll be able to turn it around. And like Dan had said, we'll be able to scale so that we can hit, the community vaccination sites localized, but then at the same time, we can utilize the infrastructure at the airport, which we can, if we do that. And Dan, this is a pretty big number. We believe that if we have the doses, we could do about 10,000 a day. That's using both garages. So ambitious, but something that we can do. But if we don't have the vaccines, it's problematic. And, there are some people that say J&J, it's not that, that big of a deal. And, obviously we, in this county, we've used Pfizer and Moderna primarily, but not having Janssen or paused isn't really that helpful as well. So these are some of the issues that the county is dealing with.
It is a significant challenge to balance the manpower that it takes to set up the event center, to utilize volunteers, to utilize people that are getting employment elsewhere, not knowing when our doses are going to arrive. We've been set up, as the president said, for quite some time now to manage thousands and thousands of vaccinations every day. It is extraordinarily frustrating to not get what we think we can deliver because we were very effective at it. But we'll pay attention. Staffing in and of itself is a real challenge. But now that we know that these additional doses are coming in, we're very excited about it. We'll kind of resume closer to the numbers that we were producing a few weeks back, and get ourselves back to normal much sooner than it's taking right now. So that's the good news.
Okay. Is there anything else, Mr. Belville, on this item?
No, sir, that's it.
All right. Any public comment? Okay, so that brings us to the item 7, Emergency Managers Association report. Ken Anderson with South San Francisco Fire.
Thank you, President Canepa. Thanks for having me. And hello, good evening, Emergency Service Council members. Thanks for having me. Just a couple things, and I'll keep it brief for everybody. I just wanted to say we're very excited as the Emergency Managers Association that some changes are happening in our Department of Office of Emergency Services and soon to be Department of Emergency Management. We look forward to fostering our alignment with them and continue our growth as an association and working with Director Belville and his team of emergency coordinators like we have in the past, and looking for us to partner even in greater chances that we get in the future. So we're very excited that that's happening. Also, Supervisor Canepa, I want to thank you. I worked for one of the cities that was able to have a pop-up vaccinating clinic, and thank you for being out in the forefront and getting as many doses as we possibly can. Absolutely correct. We start this Saturday, the second dose round, and we've been so far been able to, just in little old South City, been able to get over 1,100 first doses into arms of those certain low-income neighborhoods. So also San Mateo, Palo Alto, Redwood City, North Fair Oaks, Daly City, and Half Moon Bay, just to name a few, working very hard with the county and the health department and you to make that happen. So thank you. Just wanted to say thanks. And then lastly, even during the pandemic, the Emergency Managers Association has continued to meet via Zoom, just like everybody has. And we want to thank you for your support, and we look forward to those changes to the JPA. We'll meet next Thursday and talk about that. And we more than likely have the backing of all the changes that are happening. We totally agree with them, and we're very happy that they're happening. That's it. Have a great evening. Nice talking to you all.
And thank you for your work, and thank you to South San Francisco Fire and the CERT team. It's amazing what you're doing in that city, and we're grateful. So, and I know Eddie Flores is on the call, was really responsible for a lot of the vaccine work, and just thank you. Now we have item 8, call for items to be placed on the June agenda. Are there any items for the June agenda? Not everyone raise their hand.
Mr. President, we have as you know, the Finance Committee and the Administrative Advisory Committee. And Mr. Callaghy said that he'd like to have this part at the end so that the council members can share with us what they'd like to see on the agenda next time. And so we just wanted to put that up out front so that if there are some things that you'd like to see, then that's the purpose of it. So it's a way to make sure that everybody has a say in terms of what we want to put on the agenda in the future.
All right. I'm going to go to Miss Hurt, and then I'm going to go to Miss Schneider.
I'll make it really quick. Thanks for offering to take additional agenda item thoughts. For me, I would love to hear more about wildfire preparation and the monies that are coming from the governor's office. There's been a spotlight on what we need to do to prepare for this changing environment. And so I think a future agenda item on that alone could be really beneficial for all the cities, especially Belmont.
That sounds like a great idea. And that it's just not relegated to Belmont, San Carlos, lots of other areas. That's a wonderful suggestion. Maybe we can move that forward, Dan?
Yes, sir. Absolutely will.
Okay. Any other ideas? Mayor Schneider.
Given that Councilwoman Hurt just spoke, it's been over a year since we had the health department come in and talk about particulate pollution. And it's hard to remember back when August turned and the sky turned orange, but it would be great if maybe we could get the Air Resources Board to come in and talk about plans for the new growing particulate problem. Davina, we haven't really had a chance to talk about the lack of air monitoring devices. So we don't even have good data. We can have modeling, but we don't have data. But I hope we don't have a summer like last summer. But particulates are becoming much more of a health emergency, a disaster emergency.
Great. And maybe you can get connected with Davina. I know Davina serves on the Bay Area Air Quality Management District and CARB, and maybe work that idea out, and then see what we can do to bring it before the board. Does that sound good?
That's fine. And in addition, from the SFO noise roundtable side, it turns out that airplanes produce an awful lot of microparticulates, and that is something new, and that is a real health risk because they go deep into one's lungs, triggering asthma, etc. And I have notes on this, but I just haven't had the time to put it together. And it may not be ready by June, but I think it's something we need to look at for our health. If there's one good thing, Supervisor Canepa, we all now have masks, which most of the cities did not have a year ago. So we are a tiny bit more in place, but there's a discussion of HEPA filters for people at high risk. And to buy the HEPA filters now before they price gouge them like they did last August and September.
All right. We all need to wear our damn masks. That's for sure. Mr. Widmer, excuse me. Bill?
Mute.
Yeah, I got it. So, I think that we could see some of the statistics with regards to some of the emergency services, including the various fire districts, as well as the county ambulance system, as far as response times. And we should, essentially evaluate what the standards really are and possibly standards across the county as opposed to individual fire districts and things like that. And I think there might be some eventual discussion on merging the fire districts all together. It seems that there's some money to be saved there, especially down here.
Would you like to speak to that, Mr. Belleville?
I think what we'd probably do is take this into consideration, and perhaps I could prepare a document prior to the next meeting for the council members to review. And from that point forward, perhaps there'd be additional information that they would like to glean or have us present.
Okay, great. Thank you.
All right, Mr. Fruman.
Just a really quick comment on the last comment that the San Mateo County Pre-Hospital Emergency Services Medical Group, JPA, addresses the ambulance response times, at least for I believe just for the AMR part of it. So that is covered by a different JPA. Just information I've learned recently.
That's correct.
Yep, that is correct. That is correct, Mr. Fruman. Are there any other any other questions from the members? All right, seeing none, that'll bring us to announcements. Are there any announcements? Okay, is there any public comment? Don't all rush to the Zoom here. Is there any public comment? Any public comment and questions? You sure? Okay, going once, going twice. Okay, so, first of all, I just want to, before we conclude this meeting, Dan, I really want to thank you and your staff. I mean, really having you here, and I've been a member of this board for, God, Rico, maybe 7, 8 years. The professionalism that you bring, the inclusion of other members, and just how you carry yourself is to be commended, and we appreciate it. We know there's a huge paradigm shift going from the sheriff's office to the county manager's office, but it is absolutely critical that we make this move. And I'm excited to work with you. I know we're working with consultants and we're trying to tee things up and frame things up to make this the best organization ever. I always think about coming from a member city, and I served on this committee, on this council, excuse me, as a member of the Daly City, and members make their contributions. And I think it's incumbent on us as a county to make sure that the members get the right return. And so I'm looking forward to what this council is going to do moving forward in terms of ideas and implementation. But I want to take the time, Dan, to really thank you. People on the board have noticed the difference. I've heard from other members. And so now don't let us down now. Don't get lazy on us, Dan. Okay. The pressure's still on you. Okay. Pressure's still on. No, we're kidding, but just
I promise I'm not lazy, and I promise that we are customer service driven, and we are going to do the right thing, and we are working very hard for you. And that's from the core of my body. We will serve you. Thank you for that.
Great. And the other thing that we're mandating now is that Mr. Silverman, our county council, attends every meeting. I'll talk to Mr. Byers, but it's great to see you, David. Your input as always and wisdom is incredible. So thank you for being here as well.
That's very thoughtful, and it's rare that people actually want to see the lawyers. So I'm very happy.
On occasion. Seeing that there's no public comment, our next meeting, our ESC meeting, is June 17, 2021, and then September 16, 2021. And with that, we'll adjourn. Enjoy your end of the week and weekend coming up. Thank you.